It has been a day of grand plans from the Prime Minister and aggression from the Queensland Premier. It's beginning to get rather hot in the kitchen for Anastasia Palaszczuk, I think. But in a huge shock, the Prime Minister today offered a major olive branch to the union movement by declaring an end to any union-busting legislation. In return, he wants all parties to come to the table and talk about creating jobs, making the boat go faster, he said. And he's promising a national approach to upskilling young Aussies and funding those programs as well. It is a complete mess for those who are in that TAFE space, depending on which state or territory you live in. Creating some kind of industrial relations accord, though, will be a very tall order indeed. I'll get to all of that shortly with Sky News host Peter Credlin. I'll also speak this evening with New South Wales South Coast MP Andrew Constance about those who've fallen through the cracks following the bushfires. And he's also got something to say about the Prime Minister's address at the National Press Club this afternoon. Plus the mining company, which turned its hand to making life-saving hospital equipment, and it's going gangbusters. Great story. I'll get to today's grand plan from the Prime Minister and Peter Credlin very shortly, but I want to start tonight by drilling down into the reality of what happens to the lives of Australians when selfish premiers keep their borders shut. Now, obviously, the daily pleas from the Queensland tourist operators have exhausted all their funds, are languishing in debt, and have put off nearly all of their staff is simply not enough for the penny to drop in the vacuous heads of some of our politicians. It took several weeks of heartfelt pleading from Gold Coast business people, including the Chamber, before Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk bothered to make the journey south on the weekend. Oh, she got a lovely picture with Baz Luhrmann, did Anastasia Palaszczuk. Hardly relevant, though, at this time in the middle of a pandemic. And then what does she do when she hits the Goldie today? After hearing about the heartache firsthand, she reaffirms her misguided policy to keep the filthy New South Wales cockroaches out of Queensland.
Do you think it's a missed opportunity, though, for tourism providers as the school holidays, the winter school holidays coming up, a time when a lot of southerners like to come up here in the sunshine? Is that a missed opportunity?
Well, you obviously have a family. Do you want your family to have community transmission from New South Wales? Do you? Do you want to put that at risk?
I don't think people care about,
But I think we all care about our families.
What about our families? Danger to families? Well, firstly, children are extremely rare victims of COVID-19. And you can put in place rules and regulations that separate tourists like you do the rest of your Queenslanders. But why is this callous disregard for working people by a Labor government and the desperate small businesses? Why is this happening? Well, firstly, they look at New South Wales and the fact that there are only 300 carriers of the virus in a population of 8 million, all quarantined, mind you, but it freaks them out. Palaszczuk ignorantly thinks that they can eradicate the virus from Queensland and that will assure the Labor Party of election victory later this year. That's what this is all about. Apart from the fact that the Queensland Premier doesn't think cockroaches from New South Wales can quarantine and they can't social distance, they're from New South Wales. The only things that are about to be eradicated is the economy and people's lives. Our mental health experts have already warned about this, and in the United States they are beginning to see the first signs of fatal consequences from lockdowns and the collapse of livelihoods. Doctors at one California clinic, the John Muir Medical Center, say they've seen more suicides than COVID-19 deaths, and they're not alone. Dr. Mike Dibus-Blank, lead trauma surgeon, says we've seen a year's worth of suicide attempts in the last 4 weeks. Nurse Casey Hansen says, I've never seen so much intentional injury. The deaths are mostly young adults who are clearly not making a cry for help. They intend to die. You see, the anguish and the horror of watching everything you've built stagnate and then basically go under is unbearable for so many people, and that includes Australians, not just Americans. It's their life and it's their dream being crushed. The US is still recording hundreds of overnight deaths, and yet over 500 physicians signed a letter to the President this week pleading for him to end the shutdowns. These are doctors. Doctors who have stated that the suicide hotline call volume is up a shocking 600%. We have positioned our hospitals in Australia perfectly for a possible second wave. And we have conditioned our population about social distancing, which has nailed this virus. And just about every other seasonal illness has been eradicated. The flu almost non-existent at the moment. But depression levels are terribly high because those who have skin in the economic game are in panic mode. The advice from our Chief Medical Officer has never been about closing borders, ever. And to have some sort of state of origin race to see who can wipe out the virus first is politically selfish, it's deadly and it's totally unscientific.
From a medical point of view, I can't see why the borders are still closed.
It's costing Queensland tourism $50 million a day to keep borders closed. $50 million a day based on the most narrow local medical advice. It's draconian. It's provincial leadership at its worst, from which tens of thousands of families will never recover. You know who you are and you know how devastating it is. The Queensland government has become the greatest culprit in establishing a secondary pandemic which will be more deadly than the virus itself. Premier, wake up to yourself.